Hello and welcome. Today's video is based on chapter 24 of my book Rise of Man. Please check it out, link in the description. Greek mythology, religious books, as well as ancient history hold many red pill truths hidden in the form of tales and legends. A femme fatale is an attractive and seductive woman who will ultimately bring disaster to a man who becomes involved with her. Men from our distant past knew this fact more than some people would like to admit, and this is reflected in various myths and legends. In fact, women caused the downfall of great men on numerous occasions, both in fiction and in reality. There are two sides to this equation. The first one being that women tempt men and are the catalyst or the trigger that initiate change, or a catastrophe in those cases, and the second one being that men respond to this trigger and are enacting their own downfall. If I were to explain it in chemistry terminology, I would say that men are the activation energy and women are the catalyst. A catalyst is a substance that modifies the transition state to lower the activation energy needed for a reaction. Regardless of the potency of the catalyst, a reaction can only occur if there is sufficient activation energy. For example, a fire cannot start if there is no spark, even if the floor is covered with gasoline. Women are the gasoline and men are the spark. A fire can be created without gasoline, but there cannot be a fire without a spark. In other words, men could initiate their downfall without a woman, but it would require more activation energy, or if you will, woman facilitates the reaction that destroys a man. What does this mean? It means that men are entirely responsible for falling into temptation, and that any tragic event resulting from their foolish actions solely rests upon their shoulders. And please note that I am not trying to downplay women's role in this. It is just to say that women do not have that power on their own. That is, they generally cannot bring the downfall of a man without the active participation of that man, or without the help of other men. With that said, let's look at religious, mythological, and historical tales delivering such warning to men. Adam was the first man created by God, Book of Genesis. He was cast away from the Garden of Eden, for he disobeyed God. Why? It was because of Eve's temptation. Adam fell prey to Eve's word, despite what God told him, and ended up losing everything. Solomon was known as the wisest king. In his old age, he developed too much love towards foreign women from the east. God warned him not to associate with them, for they were practicing idolatry. But Solomon refused to listen to his creator. He was easily influenced and began worshipping other gods. Thus, Solomon angered God, and he was punished together with his people. For all his wisdom, Solomon married a woman who worshipped false idols, who eventually convinced him to abandon God, and that led to his downfall. David, vanquisher of Goliath and second king of Israel, succumbed to his temptations and slept with another man's wife, which led to him losing favor in God's eyes. He was a great king, but his failure was when he took a married woman named Bathsheba, wife of Uriah, as his own. His lust outweighed his good sense and integrity. Then, he even ordered to kill Uriah on the battlefield. David sinned, giving up his way for a woman, and he lost God's favor. Samson was the strongest man in the Bible. His enemies found out the secret and weakness of his strength through Delilah. Delilah's deception and seduction made Samson reveal his only weakness, his hair. He was humiliated, tortured, and he killed himself along with his enemies. It is important to note that in Christianity, those who commit suicide have lost all chance of forgiveness. This sin is unforgivable. It is blasphemy against the Holy Spirit and the sanctity of life. Death and eternal damnation were the consequences that Samson faced for trusting a deceitful woman, for falling to his lust. Christians are not the only one warning men about temptation, as Muslims have their own word for it. When a Muslim is talking about fitna, he will often be talking about the temptation of women. The Prophet Muhammad once said, and I quote, "I have not left behind me any fitna more harmful to men than women. The greatest temptation facing men is that of woman. A male person may be ascetic, worshipping God and secluded from the rest of the world, yet he cannot give up fancying woman." Unquote. History saw many kings, monarch, sovereign, emperor, and nation crumbling because of a woman. Here are two well-known examples that took place in China, and I apologize in advance for all the names that I will be butchering. Prince Fuchai in China became the last king of Wu in 495 BC. In ancient China, there was a beautiful woman named Qiji, who was known as one of the four great beauties of China. King Gujian trained Qiji in royal court etiquette, gifted her as a tribute to King Fuchai, and used her for instigating the downfall of the king of Wu. King Fuchai was bewitched by Qiji, and he gradually began to neglect his political duties, preferring to idle away his time with Qiji. Qiji also managed to alienate King Fuchai and his most trusted general, Wu Ziyi, resulting in the suicide of Wu Ziyi. These events made King Fuchai's subject restless, and his friends deserted him. There was political chaos, and his kingdom fell at the end of his enemies. Another such example took place in 189 after Christ. Dong Zhuo was a military general and warlord who lived in the late Eastern Han dynasty. He seized control of the capital, Luoyang, and rose to power. There was a woman named Dao Chan who played a key role in his downfall. Dong Zhuo's most trusted ally was named Lu Bu. Dao Chan was betrothed to Lu Bu, and at the same time she was presented to Dong Zhao as a concubine. Evidently, this was a plot made by their enemies, and it worked perfectly. Both Dong Zhuo and Lu Bu became fond of Dao Chan, and they could not decide how to settle the matter. Hostility grew. Dao Chan took every opportunity to add fuel to the fire, and the two men became fiercely jealous of each other. Ultimately, Lu Bu assassinated Dong Zhuo by impaling his throat with his halberd. Numerous examples of great men falling because of women are seen in both religious scripture and written history. However, my favorite tales come from Greek mythology. They are easy to conceptualize, and when you carefully dissect them, one can only see that they are filled with hidden messages that reflect the insights from the philosopher of the time. Paris was the son of King Priam and Queen Hecuba of Troy, and is best known for his elopement with Helen, Queen of Sparta. Paris abducted Helen because he was too captivated by her beauty. Paris' action led to war. It caused the death of tens of thousands of men and the fall of his nation. The next example on the list come from Greek legends about Circe, a goddess of magic and sorcery who was the most notorious femme fatale of that era. Circe would seduce men, luring them on her island. When the men, driven by their desire to touch her, visited the island, she would catch them off guard and use a spell to transform them into wild beasts, trapping them forever. Circe does not precisely represent the fact that women are capable of luring men to their death, but more so that the beauty of the female can turn even the most sophisticated man into a depraved animal. This myth illustrates, in a much exaggerated fashion, that men will entirely lose their rationality in front of a beauty, leaving them in a lower state of existence based on their most basic and primal instinct. Next we have Medusa, a gorgon who was slain by Perseus. Medusa was initially a rare beauty with golden hair. She was also a priestess of the goddess Athena. However, she broke the vow that she made to her goddess and thus was turned into a gorgon as punishment. Because of her treason, Medusa's beautiful exterior was replaced by her ugly interior. Therefore, her delicate golden hair was transformed into venomous snakes. Her once gentle, love-inspiring eyes turned into bloodshot, furious orbs, which provoked fear and disgust in the mind of the onlooker. Her former milk-white skin assumed a loathsome greenish tinge. Furthermore, whoever dared to look into her face ended up turned into stone. The tale of Medusa is packed with subtle implication and information regarding female nature. First of all, it tells us that a woman, even one as beautiful and perfect as a maiden, can have an interior so hideous as to be comparable to a gorgon. This means that a person's outward appearance can be highly deceiving. But that is far from Medusa's best-known trait, her petrifying gaze. Her gaze that could petrify men. In many ways, it symbolized the state of being heartbroken, in a state where you feel that you could easily shatter, where it is hard to breathe, and that you can't move. Being lovesick is akin to being depressed, which easily lead to inaction and a general feeling of inertia. Someone in this state of mind may find that it is impossible to keep going forward. Thus, he is petrified. In many ways, Medusa's petrifying gaze represents woman's influence over man's heart, which is why our garden has always been depicted not as a place littered with stone figures of women, but with the statues of men. Lastly, Medusa's defeat at the end of a mirror shows the irony of this myth. When Medusa was faced with her reflection, which is a representation of her sinful, dirty heart, she was petrified. By being confronted with her horrid interior, Medusa was sent in a state of mind similar to all those men that she turned to stone. In other words, she could not face herself, and she perished. Ulysses from Odysseus also has a relevant story because of his encounter with the sirens. The sirens were dangerous creatures. In Greek mythology, sirens are known for seducing sailors with their sweet voice, and by doing so, lure them to their death. Before Ulysses and his crew set sail to traverse the sirens' domain, every crew member filled their ears with beeswax to become temporarily deaf. Only then did they proceed to tightly bind Ulysses with ropes so that he could safely hear the song of the sirens. The crew set sail, and for Ulysses was bewitched by the song, the sirens looked as beautiful as the goddess of love. However, for his team of sailors who were made deaf with beeswax, the sirens looked like hungry monsters with vicious, crooked claws. In order to dive into the water and swim toward the sirens, Ulysses struggled so fiercely against his bonds that the ropes cut deep into his flesh. With this description, we can understand just how deep the male desire for sex really is. In fact, the male sex drive has the potential to overwhelm the survival instinct, and this is well depicted in the myth of the sirens. However, the symbolism behind the myth of the sirens does not stop here. Let me read you a quote from the Odyssey. Quote, "Whoever draws too close, off guard, and catches the siren's voice. In the air, no sailing home for him, no wife rising to meet him, no happy children beaming up at their father's face." Unquote. In this passage we can understand that the sirens was a danger to the family structure and the social order. In a way, it was meant to discourage sailors from going to the tempting voices of the prostitutes that awaited at every port, especially when they were away from their family for long periods of time. The symbolism goes even farther, as sometimes it isn't just a few sailors that are depicted to swim towards the sirens, but whole ships that will soon be transformed into piles of sunken and broken wood. This signifies more than just a few men losing their way to a female voice. A ship is a vehicle that is directed by numerous men. Between those men, there is a hierarchy. They have a common goal, and they are organized. The ship represents a business, a clan, or even a nation that will eventually sink because of a woman. Much like with the fall of Troy, the myth of the sirens serves to warn men that a woman can cause the downfall of much more than a handful of men. Be careful of a woman's charm, for it might bring trouble not only to your own, but also to your family or clan. Those tales and stories showed us numerous things. First, women are the most significant temptation that a man will face in his life. We also saw that women have the potential to turn men into savage beasts, or to break a man's heart, turning him into a petrified state of lethargy and inaction. We saw that external appearances could be deceptive and are completely unrelated to what lays inside of a person. Then, we saw that women could cause the betrayal of friends and the death of numerous men, and they could even cause whole nations to crumble. But to me, the most interesting fact is that even some of the mightiest heroes who ever existed all too easily succumbed to female temptation. After all, some of those famous men were entirely responsible for causing the death of tens of thousands of people just to get their hands on a woman. What a bunch of fools! Can you believe it? Men that braved the elements, went against all the odds, accomplished the impossible, and had everything that they could wish for, ended up throwing everything in the garbage for a woman. How utterly ridiculous and incompetent of them. In the end, the heroes that we idolized as kids, practically all of them are utter fools that bow down to the vagina. The hidden meaning behind this fact is quite depressing, as it means that every man is at risk of succumbing to female temptation, even the most successful and intelligent among us. This truth is universal throughout all cultures and throughout time. Even the greatest men can become white knights, cocks, and manginas. And this is why we will never get rid of gynocentrism. No matter what we do, we cannot change the fate of civilization. However, we can transform ourselves and hopefully a handful of individuals along the way. Remember guys, a catalyst is powerless on its own, and it requires activation energy to generate a reaction. You are the activation energy, which means that you have the power to dictate what will happen in your life. Don't bring a catastrophe to yourself or to others. Stay true to who you really are and create your own path. It is the only truth that matters in the end. And with this I will end my video. Thanks for watching and see you next time. My first book is now available for purchases on Amazon.com. It is a book titled Rise of Man, and it is about MGTOW and the Red Pill. I deeply appreciate any purchase of my book. feel free to leave a comment on Amazon, as it really helps with the algorithm to boost my visibility. I find this message to be very important, and Rise of Men is available for free on my website, manhoodshittyshit.com, so please feel free to read it here. I also write fictions of the fantastic medieval type. My style is very dark and gruesome, and of course there are some elements of the red pill in the interaction between characters. It will be available for free read this summer.